The grand chancel of the Concordium was a void made solid, a chamber carved from the heart of a captured singularity. Light did not illuminate this place. It was born from the very architecture, flowing in silent, geometric rivers across walls that held the faint, trapped starlight of millennia. Floating at its center was the dais of worlds, a suspended disk of polished obsidian upon which the delegates of 1,000 star systems convened. Here, silence was a language, a currency of power and dread, and for cycles it had been the only currency traded. The silence from the humans was the most terrifying of all. High Kalen Vorlag felt the weight of it in his crystalline carapace, a pressure that resonated deep within the harmonic structures of his being. His multifaceted eyes, usually attuned to the subtle shifts in political spectra, saw only a uniform shade of terror reflected in the varied faces of the Concordium's delegates. From the hulking, stone-skinned Xylos Imperator to the shimmering, gaseous forms of the Lumini envoys, the same question hung in the ionized air. What would the humans do? The atrocity had been a strategic necessity, a regrettable but logical calculation. That was the official record, etched into the Concordium's memory crystals. The humans, a young and volatile species, were expanding with a chaotic, unpredictable fervor. Their technology was patchwork, their philosophy incoherent, their art a discordant scream of raw emotion. They were a contagion of novelty in a galaxy that had long ago settled into a stable, predictable equilibrium. The Concordium, as the self-appointed shepherds of galactic order, had decided to prune the growing branch before it could threaten the ancient tree. The weapon they used was absolute, a testament to their ancient power, a stellar ignition inhibitor, a device that could snuff out a star as one might a candle. They had chosen a target they believed to be a nascent colony, a peripheral system of little consequence to the human core. They had been wrong. The system they had extinguished, the one the humans called Kepler 186f, had not been a mere outpost. It had been a cultural heartland, a world of art and philosophy, a cradle where a significant portion of their species, memory and soul had been nurtured. And then had come the silence. It was not the silence of grief or mourning. It was not the silence of a wounded animal licking its wounds. It was an absolute suffocating void. No transmissions, no diplomatic protests, no fleets mobilizing at their borders, no desperate pleas for aid or furious declarations of war. For years, the vast sensor nets of the Concordium had listened to the human sphere of influence and heard nothing. It was as if a species known for its constant, chaotic noise had ceased to exist. But they had not ceased. The Concordium's deepest probes, cloaked and cautious, confirmed that human civilization was not just continuing but thriving. Their industrial output was increasing exponentially. Their worlds were fortifying. Their science was advancing at a rate that defied all known models of technological progression. They were growing stronger in the dark, and the Concordium could only watch and wait and fear. The fear was not of war. The Concordium had waged and won wars that had reshaped spiral arms. The fear was of the unknown. The fear was of a species that had looked upon the murder of billions of its own and had responded not with rage, but with a cold, silent, and unified purpose. They were preparing something, and whatever it was, it would be proportional to the crime. Imperator Cathar of the Xylos, his rocky hide grinding as he shifted his immense weight, broke the suffocating quiet. His voice was the sound of tectonic plates shifting, a low rumble that filled the chancel with physical menace. This paralysis is our doom. We made a decision based on logic. We excised a threat. The response of the primitives is irrelevant. Their silence is a weakness, a sign of their shock and inability to retaliate against a superior power. We should strike again, and this time we should strike their home world. We will burn their cradle, and the last of their noise will be extinguished from the galaxy forever. We will finish what we started. His logic was brutal, simple, and for many in the chancel, deeply seductive. It offered an end to the gnawing uncertainty. An act of violence was something the Concordium understood. It had clear rules, predictable outcomes. Annihilation was a known variable. Vorlag allowed the Imperator's words to settle before he responded, his own voice a series of soft, resonant chimes that contrasted sharply with the Xylos' grating speech. Your logic, Imperator, is the logic of a predator, not a guardian. You see only the tooth and the claw. You fail to comprehend the mind of the prey. You call them primitives, yet they have mastered a form of unity we, in our 10,000 cycles of existence, have never achieved. An entire species fell silent in a single moment. Not one faction broke. Not one politician sought advantage. Not one panic cry for help escaped their sphere. Think of the discipline required. Think of the collective will. What you see as weakness, I see as the most terrifying strength this galaxy has ever witnessed. Vorlag swiveled his head, his multifaceted eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates. We did not merely wound them, we gave them a reason. A single, unifying purpose that has erased all their internal divisions. We have forged our own executioners. Illumini Envoy, a being of pure, swirling light contained within a vaguely humanoid energy field, pulsed its disagreement. Its communication was not sound, but a direct teleempathic projection of condescending reason. Hi, Kalen, your fear is clouding your analysis. The humans are an emotional species. Their art, their history, it is all a testament to their passions. Such a species cannot sustain a cold, logical response. Their silence is the calm before a storm of predictable, futile rage. They will launch their fleets, their ships will break against our defenses, and their civilization will crumble. It is the inevitable outcome. And what if it is not? Vorlag chimed back, his own resonance carrying a trace of cold dread. What if they are not preparing for a war you understand? We have studied their history. We have seen their patterns. They are masters of asymmetrical response. When faced with overwhelming force, they do not meet it head-on. They change the nature of the conflict. When confronted with an unbreachable wall, they do not break themselves upon it. They learn to phase through it. Their defining trait is not emotion, but adaptation. They have had years to adapt to us, to the knowledge that a power exists that can extinguish their stars. What kind of philosophy, what kind of science, what kind of weapon would be born from such a revelation? The Chancellor fell silent once more, the weight of Vorlag's question pressing down on them all. He had spent the years of human silence poring over the captured data from their cultural archives, the fragmented remnants of their public information networks from before the attack. He had witnessed their stories, their myths, and he had discovered a concept for which his own language and the languages of the Concordium had no true equivalent. It was a concept they called revenge. It was not simple retribution, not the cold balancing of accounts that the Concordium practiced. Human revenge, as depicted in their art, was a force of nature. It was patient. It was creative. It was absolute. It was a fire that could smolder for generations, only to erupt and consume not just the perpetrator, but the very memory of their existence. It was a cleansing, a remaking of the universe to erase a great wrong. The delegates of the Concordium feared a human fleet appearing on their borders. Vorlag feared something far, far worse. He feared they would never see the humans coming at all. He feared that one day, the stars of the Concordium would simply begin to go out, one by one, and they would never even know why. Just as the oppressive silence threatened to become permanent, a single, sharp chime cut through the chamber. It was the alert from the Central Monitoring Command, an intrusion of the outside universe into their sanctum of fear. Every delegate focused on the vast, dark space in the center of the chancel, where a holographic display shimmered into existence. It was a view of the Concordium's primary star system, the very heart of their ancient empire. And hanging there in the silent void where no unauthorized vessel had penetrated for millennia was a ship. It was a single vessel, impossibly small against the backdrop of the Concordium's orbital defense platforms and celestial shipyards. It was sleek, a simple teardrop of a vessel made of a material that was perfectly non-reflective, a sliver of pure blackness against the stars. It bore no visible weapons, no shields, no markings of any kind. It simply was. And it was broadcasting a message, a simple, repeating carrier wave, a message in a human language. It was a request to open communications. It stated they came in peace. The terror in the chancel solidified, becoming something cold and sharp. The humans were here. The silence was over, and their revenge, in whatever form it would take, was about to begin. The debate over how to respond was brief and fraught with a level of panic Vorlag had never witnessed in the Grand Chancel. Imperator Cathar demanded the ship's immediate obliteration. It is a trick, a probe, a Trojan horse carrying some unimaginable plague or mimetic weapon. Destroy it now before it can act. Others argued for caution, for capturing the vessel, for dissecting its technology and its occupants. It was Vorlag who silenced them all, his chimes ringing with a chilling finality. They have bypassed every sensor net, every patrol, every defense we have to place a single ship at the throat of our empire. They did not do this to be destroyed before they have spoken. They are demonstrating their reach. They are telling us that they can touch us whenever and wherever they choose. If we destroy this ship, another will appear, perhaps inside this very chancel. We have no choice. We will listen. And so, with the collective will of 1,000 worlds holding its breath, the communication channel was opened. The central hologram shifted. The image of the small, dark ship was replaced by an interior view. The design was minimalist, almost sterile, with soft, indirect lighting and no visible control interfaces. In the center of the frame stood a single human. It was a female dressed in a simple, unadorned gray tunic. Her hair was dark, pulled back from a face that was placid, serene. Her eyes, however, were what captured the attention of every delegate. They were dark, ancient, and held a depth of stillness that was utterly unnerving. There was no anger in them, no fear, no hatred. There was only a profound, unshakable calm. She did not look like a warrior. She looked like a philosopher or a monk. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova of the Terran Collective," she said, her voice smooth, her words perfectly translated into the Concordium's formal dialect by the ship systems. The translation was flawless, capturing every nuance, every subtle intonation. It was a demonstration in itself. "I bring you greetings." The sheer audacity of the statement sent a wave of disbelief through the chancel. Greetings, after what they had done. Imperator Cathar surged forward, his voice a bellow of rage. "Greetings? You dare offer us greetings? Your species should be on its knees, begging for the mercy of a swift end. What trickery is this? What insult are you delivering before you die?" Ambassador Rostova's expression did not change. Her gaze remained fixed, not on any one delegate, but on the chancel as a whole, as if she could see each and every one of them. "We are not here to trade insults, Imperator Cathar. We are not here to die. We are here to speak of consequence." Vorlag moved to the forefront of the dais, his form casting a long, crystalline shadow. "Ambassador," he chimed, his tone carefully measured, betraying none of the cold dread coiling within him. "We are listening. You have our complete attention. You speak of consequence. We understand the crime we have committed. We know the depth of the loss we inflicted upon your people. We have spent your years of silence contemplating the form your retribution would take. So tell us, what is your price? What are your terms? What is the nature of your revenge?" The human ambassador held the silence for a long moment, letting the question hang in the air, letting the weight of 1,000 worlds' fear press down upon it. When she finally spoke, her words were quiet, but they struck with the force of a physical blow. "Revenge," she said, her lips curving in a smile that was not a smile, an expression of profound, ancient pity. "It is a concept we remember from our primitive history, an emotional artifact, the desire to inflict pain in response to pain. A pointless cycle that diminishes both the avenger and the vanquished. We have not come for revenge. Revenge is beneath us. It is a tool for children and barbarians." The statement was a greater insult than any threat could have been. She was not just dismissing their fears, she was dismissing their entire worldview. Cathar bristled, his stony fists clenching. "If not revenge, then what? War? Annihilation? Do you intend to lecture us to death before your fleets arrive?" "There are no fleets," Rostova said simply. The words were so plainly spoken, so devoid of deception, that they were more chilling than any lie. "There is only this ship. We did not spend the last years building weapons to destroy you. It would be a waste of our time and resources. Your destruction would teach us nothing." Vorlag felt a disquieting shift in his perception. This was not going as any of the Concordium's models had predicted. The human response was not just asymmetrical, it was operating on a completely different philosophical axis. "Then why are you here, Ambassador?" he chimed, his voice resonating with genuine confusion. "If not for war, not for revenge, what is your purpose?" Rostova's gaze seemed to meet his own across the void. "We are here to give you a gift," she said. "The silence you have witnessed was not a preparation for war. It was a period of mourning and of work. We have been very, very busy. We have been working on a project to honor the memory of those you extinguished, the billions of souls from Kepler 186F. She paused, and the central hologram behind her flickered, the view of her ship's interior dissolving. It was replaced by a stark, terrifying image. The dead, darkened sun of the Kepler system, a cold cinder in the blackness surrounded by the frozen, lifeless worlds they had murdered. The delegates recoiled. It was a brutal, accusatory image. "You believe you are powerful," Rostova's voice continued, now an overlay to the scene of their crime. "You wield the power to end life on a planetary scale. You can extinguish stars. It is an impressive, if crude, application of force. You are masters of destruction, but destruction is easy. It is the path of entropy. It is the base state of the universe. Creation, preservation, that is a far more difficult path. We have chosen the more difficult path." The image on the hologram began to change. A faint, golden light began to emanate from the human ship, which was now visible as a tiny speck in the corner of the projection. The light was not energy in a conventional sense. It was something else, something the Concordium sensors, even at this extreme range, could not classify. It was a wave of pure information, of quantum-entangled data flowing at superluminal speeds towards the dead Kepler system. "When you extinguished that star," Rostova explained, her voice calm and pedagogical, as if a teacher explaining a simple lesson to a slow student, "you did not erase the lives there. You merely scattered them. The information that constituted every living being, every thought, every memory, every work of art was encoded in the final photons that fled the system, in the gravitational ripples that still echo from its death, in the quantum foam of spacetime itself. The universe remembers everything. One simply needs to know how to listen. The view zoomed in on the dead system. The informational light from the human ship washed over the frozen planets. And then the impossible happened. The image of the dead system shimmered, and a new image began to form over it, a ghost of what had been. It was Kepler 186f as it was moments before its death. Cities of light bloomed on the surface of the planet. Shuttles and ships traced graceful patterns in the sky. Vorlag could almost feel the life, the vibrancy, the noise. "We call it the mnemonic engine," Rostova said, her voice filled with a quiet, profound reverence. "It is not a weapon. It is a library. It does not resurrect the dead. That would be a violation of the natural order. Instead, it gathers the scattered information, the echoes of existence, and reconstructs a perfect living simulation. A saved state, a preserved memory of what was lost." The holographic image solidified. It was no longer a ghost. It was a living, breathing world. The Concordium sensors tied into the holographic feed registered life signs, billions of them. They were reading the data from a simulation so perfect, so complete, that it was indistinguishable from reality. They were watching a world of ghosts living out their lives, unaware of their own demise. "This is your consequence," Rostova said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence of the chancel. "This is our revenge. It is not your death. It is their life. We have taken your greatest act of destruction and rendered it meaningless. You snuffed out a star, and we have preserved its memory for eternity. Your power is to unmake. Ours is to remember. From this day forward, this data stream, this living memory of Kepler 186f, will be broadcast on all frequencies to every corner of this galaxy. Every civilization, every emerging species will see this. They will see the world you destroyed, and they will see that it lives on, preserved by the very people you tried to erase. Your atrocity will not be remembered as an act of power. It will be remembered as a futile, pathetic gesture, nullified by a species that values memory more than life itself. You will not be feared. You will be pitied." Imperator Cathar stumbled back, his rock-like face a mask of utter disbelief. The foundation of his entire philosophy, that ultimate power lay in the ability to destroy, had been shattered. He was a creature of force, and he had just been defeated by an act of art. He had tried to burn a library, and its librarians had simply rewritten every book from memory and published them for the entire universe to read. Vorlag stared at the image of the living, simulated world. He saw families. He saw artists. He saw children playing under a sun that no longer existed. He felt the weight of every single one of those billion lives, not as a statistic of a military action, but as individual souls, now preserved as a testament to human will. This was a punishment beyond anything the Concordium could have conceived. It was not a punishment of the body, but of the soul. It was a sentence to be served for eternity, an inescapable reminder of their failure, of their moral and technological inferiority. They had been judged, and their sentence was to bear witness, to be forever haunted by the ghosts they had made, ghosts who were now more alive than their murderers. The humans had not come to destroy them. They had come to shame them into insignificance. ND in the silent, horrified chancel, Vorlag understood that this was a revenge far more complete and far more terrifying than simple annihilation. The aftermath in the grand chancel was not one of anger or a renewed desire for conflict, but a profound, collective collapse of certainty. The Xylo's Imperator, Cathar, stood as still as a mountain, the fires of his aggression finally extinguished, replaced by the cold ash of irrelevance. His entire existence had been predicated on the belief that might was the ultimate arbiter of reality. The humans had presented a reality where might was a crude and obsolete tool, and his spirit, the spirit of his entire warrior race, had been broken by a beam of light carrying memories. The Lumini envoys, who had spoken of predictable emotional storms, shimmered with a chaotic, turbulent energy, their teleempathic projections broadcasting waves of pure, unadulterated awe and intellectual terror. They, the beings of logic and analysis, had failed to predict the one outcome that was not on any of their charts, that the human's response would be one of transcendent grace. Vorlag felt the foundations of the Concordium itself cracking beneath his feet. For millennia, their power had been absolute because their view of the universe was the only one that mattered. They were the apex, the final word on existence. Now, a younger species had held up a mirror, and the reflection was that of a primitive, flailing creature, swinging a club in a world where others were composing symphonies. He stepped forward again, his chimes soft, imbued with a humility that his rank had never before required. "Ambassador Rostova," he began, the formality a thin veil over the raw emotion in his resonance. "There are no words in our lexicon to adequately describe what you have shown us. We offer no defense for our actions. There is none. We offer our surrender. The Grand Concordium will submit to any judgment, any terms the Terran Collective wishes to impose. We place ourselves at your mercy." The offer was absolute. The unconditional surrender of the most powerful galactic empire in known history, offered not in the face of overwhelming military force, but in the face of an overwhelming moral and philosophical victory. For a moment, the image of Ambassador Rostova on the screen seemed to soften. The profound, ancient stillness in her eyes was tinged with something new. It was not triumph. It was a deep, weary sadness. "We do not want your surrender, High Kalen Vorlag," she said, her voice losing its pedagogical edge and becoming something more intimate, more direct. "Submission is as useless to us as revenge. We do not seek to rule you. We seek to enlighten you. Your surrender would be an abdication of responsibility. We require the opposite. We require you to accept your responsibility, to evolve." The word hung in the chamber. Evolve, it was not a political term. It was a biological, a spiritual one. "Evolve into what?" Vorlag asked, the question genuine, devoid of artifice. "Into partners," Rostova replied. The central hologram shifted again. The poignant, beautiful image of the resurrected Kepler 186F vanished, and in its place was a map of their galaxy. It was a map unlike any the Concordium had ever produced. It was not a map of territories, of political boundaries and resource deposits. It was a map of silence. Across the swirling spiral arms, hundreds of points were marked. Some were faint, ancient. Others were brighter, more recent. "For centuries," Rostova began, her voice taking on a new gravity, a new urgency, "we have been listening to the universe. When we first reached for the stars, we expected to find a cosmos teeming with life, with signals, with the noise of countless civilizations. Instead, we found a great and terrible silence. We found the ruins of empires that dwarfed your own. We found celestial engineering projects abandoned mid-construction. We found worlds that had been home to hyper-advanced species, now scoured clean of all but the faintest traces of their existence." She indicated the points of light on the map. "These are not fallen civilizations in the way you would understand it. They did not die in wars. They did not succumb to natural disasters. They simply stopped. Each one reached a certain threshold of technological and energetic output, and then they vanished from the universe. We call it the Great Filter, but we do not believe it is a natural barrier in evolution. We believe it is an external one." A new projection appeared, a complex waveform analysis overlaid on the galactic map. It was a subtle, repeating pattern, a signal buried deep in the cosmic background radiation, a signal so faint that the Concordium's own sensors had dismissed it as noise for eons. "There is something out there," Rostova said, her calm voice now laced with a coldness that was not of anger but of primal dread. "An intelligence, a force, a mechanism, we do not know what it is. We only know its effect. It is a harvester. It allows civilizations to grow, to blossom, and then when they reach a certain point, when they become interesting, it culls them. The silence we heard was not an absence of life. It was the sound of a graveyard." The full, staggering weight of her revelation descended upon the chancel. The conflict between the Concordium and humanity, the atrocity, the fear of revenge. It all shrank, becoming a petty squabble between two fledgling tribes in the shadow of an approaching cosmic storm. Their entire known history was a footnote in a much larger, much darker story. "The mnemonic engine," Rostova continued, "was not built to shame you. That was a secondary, if necessary, application. Its primary purpose was a proof of concept. If we could not save the bodies, we reasoned perhaps we could save the minds, the consciousness. It was our attempt to build an ark for the soul, a way to preserve the memory of our species in the face of inevitable extinction. But it is not enough. To simply be remembered is not to live." Her gaze swept across them again, no longer an ambassador addressing a defeated foe, but a leader calling for allies in a war for existence itself. "We have been working on something else during our silence, a way to fight back, not just to hide, not just to be remembered, but to confront this filter. But our knowledge is incomplete. Our resources are finite. We are one species, alone in the dark. We cannot do it by ourselves." This was the true purpose. This was the reason for the single ship, for the demonstration, for the philosophical dismantling of their pride. It was not a punishment. It was a recruitment. They had not come to destroy the Concordium, but to break it down and rebuild it into something stronger, something better, something they could use. Your attack on Kepler 186f was the greatest tragedy in our history, Rostova stated, her voice resonating with the truth of that loss. But it was also an opportunity. It forced us to accelerate our plans, and it forced you to confront the limits of your own philosophy. It showed us that you were powerful, but that your power was misdirected. It showed us that you were capable of great unity, but that your unity was born of fear. We needed to know if you were capable of more. We needed to see if, when confronted not with a threat you could fight, but with a truth you could not deny, you would break, or you would change. We had to break you to see if you could be remade. The choice she was offering was stark. Cling to their old ways, to their pride and their fear, and face the silent, oncoming cosmic threat alone, just another point of light on a map of the dead. Or they could evolve. They could accept the humbling truth of their place in the universe, join with their former victims, and stand together against the darkness. It was a choice between annihilation and alliance. Vorlag looked at the galactic map, at the chilling evidence of the Great Filter. He looked at the face of the human ambassador, a being who represented a species that had turned the deepest imaginable grief into the motivation for a project of breathtaking genius and scope. They had faced the murder of a world and had responded by preparing for a war to save the galaxy. He felt the fear that had gripped him for years finally recede, replaced by something entirely new, something he had not felt since he was a young Kaelin looking at the stars for the first time. A sense of profound, terrifying, and exhilarating awe. The one thing aliens feared most, he now understood, was not human revenge. It was human hope. The terrifying, insane, and indomitable hope that led them to challenge not just empires, but the fundamental laws of their own extinction. His chimes rang through the silent chancel, clear and strong, no longer a sound of mourning or surrender, but of decision. "Ambassador Rostova," Vorlag said, his voice filled with the weight of a new and terrible purpose. "The Grand Concordium has been a shepherd to a flock that was already doomed. Our age of guardianship is over. Tell us what you need. Our evolution begins now." In the heart of the ancient empire, surrounded by the delegates of 1,000 worlds, the High Kaelin looked upon the image of the human and for the first time understood that their long, stable history was over. The real story, the story of survival against the silent, hungry dark, had only just begun. And humanity, the chaotic, emotional primitives they had once sought to prune, were not the threat. They were the galaxy's only, and perhaps its final, chance.